A little girl was found, with her hands tied and her body almost entirely covered in dirt, abandoned on the outskirts of a luxury gated community. Just when all seemed lost, a cold and distant man found her. What happened next would forever change both of their destinies, revealing a connection to the past that no one could have imagined. Subscribe to the channel for stories that touch your heart every day. The millionaire adjusted his silk tie while gazing at the view from his penthouse. From up there, the world seemed small and orderly, exactly how he liked it. The buildings lined up like dominoes, the cars reduced to colorful dots in motion, all following a predictable logic, just like his meticulously planned life. He checked his platinum watch, an heirloom from his father. 7 in the morning. Time for his morning walk, the only time of day he dispensed with the company of his driver and security detail. For that half hour, he allowed himself to be just an ordinary man, though he knew he never had been one. The private elevator took him directly to the ground floor. He greeted the doorman with a distant nod and followed his usual route, skirting the artificial lake of the community. He had chosen to live there precisely for the security and the absence of children. The Homeowners Association rules were clear about the prohibition of residents under 18. He had never tolerated the noise of children, the incessant questions, the chaos that a simple child could cause. Little irrational beings, he often thought. He preferred the company of sensible adults, preferably those who understood the value of silence. That's when a barely perceptible sound interrupted his thoughts. He looked around, annoyed by the interruption. Nothing, probably some animal, he concluded, resuming his walk. But the sound came again, a muffled whimper, so faint it seemed, like a breath. He stopped again, this time intrigued. The sound was coming from a vacant lot adjacent to the community, separated only by a low fence. Against all his instincts for self-preservation, he approached, pushing his way through the tall weeds. An anthill. That's what he initially thought when he saw the small mound of disturbed earth. But anthills don't make sounds. He approached, closer, and his heart quickened when he noticed what appeared to be a human finger emerging from the dirt. "My God," he murmured as he knelt down, ruining his imported linen pants. He began to dig frantically with his bare hands, feeling the damp earth under his perfectly manicured nails. First, a hand emerged, small, incredibly small. A child's hand, with wrists bound by a dirty cord. He continued digging, now consumed by a despair he had never experienced. The face appeared, eyes closed, pale skin, bluish lips. A little girl, no older than 6. She was covered in dirt up to her neck, as if someone had tried to bury her alive. Carefully, he unearthed the small, fragile body, immediately checking for vital signs, as he had learned in a mandatory first aid course for executives. "Breathe, please," he whispered, momentarily forgetting who he was and all his prejudices against children. As if answering his plea, the girl coughed weakly, expelling dirt and saliva. Her eyes opened, large, frightened, a deep brown that reminded him of the exact shade of whiskey he drank on lonely nights. "Help," was the word that escaped the child's cracked lips, so low it seemed more like a thought than a spoken word. The millionaire didn't hesitate. He grabbed his cell phone, dialed 911, and in the meantime wrapped the girl in his bespoke Italian coat. He noticed the dirty, torn clothes, the tangled hair, and the lost look of someone who had seen things no child should ever see. "You're safe now," he said, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. The girl just stared at him as if assessing the truth of that statement. Then, in the most unlikely of gestures, she raised a trembling hand and touched the millionaire's face, leaving streaks of dirt on his impeccably shaven skin. "You're my mama's dream man," she whispered with difficulty. "She said you were real." The words pierced his chest like a well-aimed arrow, cracking his armor of indifference. Something in that sentence paralyzed him completely, as if the entire universe had conspired for that meeting. When the ambulance arrived, the paramedics found an unusual scene. One of the most powerful men in the country, known for his coldness, kneeling in the mud, holding an abandoned child, as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. The hallway of the private hospital had never seemed so long. The millionaire paced back and forth, his hands still covered in dirt, his suit ruined. The staff cast curious glances, but no one dared to ask questions. His name opened doors and closed mouths. "Sir?" The doctor emerged from the emergency room. "Can we talk?" He nodded, following her to a private room. The professional's expression was serious, measured. "The girl is stable, but she shows signs of severe malnutrition and dehydration. There are bruises on her arms and legs, some recent, others old. She was abused." The question came out with difficulty, as if the words burned his throat. "We haven't found evidence of that, fortunately. But there are clear signs of neglect and mistreatment. And something more disturbing, she appears to have been sedated before being buried." The millionaire closed his eyes for a moment. "Will she talk?" "Probably tomorrow. We administered a light sedative so she could rest. The police have already been notified, but..." She hesitated. "Are you related to the child?" "No," he answered quickly. Then something made him add, "Not that I know of." Those last words hung in the air like an unanswered question. Why had he said that? What had that little girl, with her enigmatic words, awakened in him? "Can I see her?" The doctor led him to the room where the small figure lay between white sheets. She seemed even smaller now, connected to tubes and machines that monitored her fragile life. Her hair, now clean, was revealed to be a reddish-brown, forming natural curls around her. Pale face, he approached cautiously. Something in that scene transported him to a distant past, a past he had buried as deeply as the girl had been buried in that vacant lot. "Is there something I should know?" asked the doctor, observing his troubled expression. "Over 20 years ago," he began, surprising himself, "there was a woman, hair this same color. She worked at my company when I was just starting out." The doctor waited, without pressing. "She was laid off during a restructuring. I didn't even know her name back then. She was just a number on a spreadsheet." Silence hung heavy in the room, broken only by the steady beep of the monitors. "Sir, I suggest you get some rest. Go home, take a shower. The little girl won't wake up anytime soon." But he couldn't leave. He asked for clean clothes to be brought, settled into the armchair next to the bed, and for the first time in years, let his appointments wait. His cell phone vibrated incessantly. His assistant, worried about his absence from the important meeting with foreign investors. The company lawyer, warning about a potential PR crisis if the press found out about his involvement with an abandoned child. The head of security, advising caution in the face of the inexplicable situation. He ignored them all. Something bigger held him to that hospital room. It wasn't just compassion, a feeling he thought he had lost long ago. It was an uncomfortable sensation, as if he were standing before a mirror that reflected not his present, but an unresolved past. The girl's words echoed in his mind. "You're my mama's dream man." How could that be? Who was this child's mother, and why had that phrase affected him so deeply? During the early hours, as he watched the little one's restless sleep, he allowed himself a rare moment of honesty. Perhaps there were many women in his past whose names he didn't remember, faces that had become blurred in memory, lives that had crossed his without leaving marks, at least not on him. But what if one of those women had held on to something of him? A face, a promise, a fantasy. And what if this girl was the result of a forgotten encounter? When morning arrived, a decision had formed in his mind. He picked up the phone and called the only person he trusted for discreet investigations. The first instruction was clear. to find any record of a former employee with reddish-brown hair laid off about 20 years ago. Little did he know that this search into the past would reveal much more than he was prepared to face. Dawn was breaking when the girl opened her eyes. For a moment, she seemed confused, as if she didn't recognize the white ceiling of the hospital or the sound of the equipment around her. Then, her gaze fell upon the millionaire, who was dozing in the uncomfortable armchair next to the bed. "You didn't leave," she said in a voice so light it seemed more like a whisper. The man awoke immediately, straightening up in the chair. He ran a hand over his face, trying to disguise the accumulated fatigue. "How do you feel?" he asked, maintaining a safe distance. The girl didn't answer immediately. She looked around. The room, the machines, the flowers that some kind nurse had left on the nightstand. Finally, she turned her eyes back to him. "You took me out of the dirt." It wasn't a question, but a statement, spoken with a disconcerting simplicity. "Yes," he replied, unable to elaborate any further. "They said I was going to sleep forever," she continued, looking at her own hands, now clean, but still with marks on her wrists where she had been tied. "That I was a problem." The millionaire felt something twist inside him. Anger, indignation, a protective instinct he didn't know he possessed. "Who said that? Who did this to you?" The girl lowered her gaze, suddenly fearful. "The bad men. They took my mummy first." A nurse entered at that moment, interrupting the conversation. She checked the patient's vital signs, adjusted the IV drip, and gave the millionaire an approving look, as if the fact that he was still there was worthy of admiration. "She's recovering well," she informed him in a low voice. "The detective will be here later to talk to her, and Child Protective Services has already been notified." The mention of the authorities caused an immediate reaction. The girl gripped the sheet tightly, her eyes wide with fear. "I don't want to go to the place for children without mommies," she whispered as soon as the nurse left. "We went there once to ask for food, and the kids looked sad, even when they smiled." The millionaire felt strangely out of place. His organized and predictable life, his meetings, his multi-million-dollar acquisitions, it all seemed so distant from this hospital room, from this raw reality that now presented itself before him. "My mama talked about you," said the girl, breaking the silence. He straightened in his chair. "What did she say?" "That one day I'd find the blue-eyed man who lived in the glass castle." She paused, studying him with curiosity. "Your eyes are blue, and you seem to live in a castle." The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine. It was true, his eyes were an intense blue, a maternal inheritance, and his apartment, the penthouse covered in mirrored glass, could well be described as a modern castle. But it was unlikely. "What was your mother like?" he asked, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Pretty," replied the girl with simplicity. "Hair red like fire when the sun shines. She sang to me every night, even when she was very tired." Red hair, like the woman who now surfaced in his memory, a quiet employee who used to work late in the finance department. He barely remembered her, just fragments. A shy smile, a report delivered punctually, a discreet presence in general meetings. "Where is your mother now?" he asked, already dreading the answer. The girl's eyes filled with tears. "She got very sick. She slept a lot, coughed up blood. One day, she didn't wake up. The bad men said I couldn't stay in the shack anymore, that I cost money." The millionaire felt his heart clench. He imagined the scene. A sick woman, probably with tuberculosis or some similar disease, living in precarious conditions, telling stories about a blue-eyed man to her little daughter. "What was her name?" he asked, his voice almost failing. The girl was silent for a few seconds. "Mama," she finally replied, "but the other people called her another name, a pretty name, like a flower." At this moment, the millionaire's phone vibrated. It was the private investigator he had hired the night before. The message was short. Found records of a former employee who may fit the description. Daisy Oliveira, Finance Department, laid off 19 years ago, trying to locate more information. Daisy, a flower name. The millionaire looked at the girl, who was now playing distractedly with the hospital bed controls. Could it be that... "How old are you?" he asked, trying to control the tremor in his voice. 6, she replied, holding up 6 small fingers. "I had my birthday when the leaves were falling from the trees. 19 years ago, the layoff. A pregnant employee, maybe. A forgotten encounter, a responsibility never assumed." Questions swirled in his mind as the door opened. A man in a suit walked in, followed by a middle-aged woman with a briefcase in her hands. "I'm Detective Ramirez," he introduced himself, "and this is the caseworker, Dr. Miller. We need to talk about the minor." The girl shrank back in the bed, instinctively reaching for the millionaire's hand. He hesitated for a moment and then, defying all his self-preservation instincts, intertwined his fingers with hers. "She's not going anywhere," he declared, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "At least not until we fully clarify what happened." "You don't have any legal standing with the child," explained the caseworker, adjusting her glasses. On her thin nose, "You can't simply decide her fate." The millionaire remained impassive. Years of tough negotiations had taught him to maintain his composure even when everything inside him screamed. "I perfectly understand the legal issues, Dr. Miller," he replied, gently releasing the girl's hand and gesturing towards the door. "Can we talk outside?" In the hallway, away from the attentive ears of the child, his posture changed subtly. He was no longer just a concerned citizen, but the influential businessman who could make fortunes move with a simple phone call. "I have reason to believe that there may be a connection between me and the girl," he declared, keeping his voice low. "I request a 72-hour grace period before any decision is made about placing her in shelters or foster care." The detective scratched his chin thoughtfully. "We have a standard procedure to follow, sir, but I can give you 24 hours, tops." "I need more time to confirm a suspicion," insisted the millionaire. "Besides, she's a witness to a crime. Whoever buried her is still out there." This last argument seemed to sway the officer. The caseworker, however, remained adamant. "The priority is to ensure the safety and well-being of the child." "And what well-being will she have in an overcrowded shelter?" the businessman countered, allowing a rare emotional tone to color his words. "I'm willing to cover all the costs of hospitalization in a private room with 24-hour security, at least until we find out more about her situation." After a brief discussion between the two representatives of the state, they reached an agreement. The millionaire would have 48 hours to present concrete information about a possible family connection. Meanwhile, the girl would remain in the hospital under police protection. Upon returning to the room, he found the little one looking out the window, her bare feet dangling over the bed that was too high for her size. "Are you leaving?" she asked, without taking her eyes off the blue sky outside. "No," he replied, surprising himself again with his own certainty. "I need to sort some things out, but I'll be back soon." That's when he noticed that the girl was holding something against her chest, a small silver pendant hanging from a thin, worn chain. "What's that?" he asked, approaching. "It was my mama's," explained the child, opening her hand to show a delicate heart-shaped locket. "It's the only thing I have of her. The bad men didn't see it because I hid it in my mouth when they came." The millionaire felt his heart race. "Can I see it?" Carefully he took the locket. It looked old, with hand-engraved details. Upon opening it, he found a tiny, faded photograph. A young woman with red hair smiled shyly at the camera, and on the back of the photo, almost illegible with age, was written, "To D, with eternal love, G.A. G.A. Gabriel Almeida. His name. His legs faltered, forcing him to sit on the edge of the bed. That woman. He recognized her now. Daisy. From the finance department. There was an end-of-year party, a lot of champagne, a meeting in the empty office. A pang of shame struck him as he realized that he barely remembered that night. For him, it had been just another episode without consequences. For her, for Daisy, it apparently meant much more. "Sir?" The girl's voice brought him back to the present. "Are you okay?" He nodded mechanically, returning the locket. How to explain to a 6-year-old the whirlwind of emotions and revelations that now consumed him? "What's your name?" he asked finally, realizing he still didn't know what to call her. "Hope," replied the girl. "Mama said she gave me that name because I was born when she had lost everything except hope." The name hit him like a physical blow. Hope, what her mother had kept even after being discarded by a growing company, even living in poverty, even raising alone a daughter who could be his. "It's a beautiful name," he managed to say, while discreetly wiping away a tear that insisted on forming in the corner of his eye. "Nice to meet you, Hope. My name is Gabriel." At that moment, his phone vibrated again. The investigator had found more information, including the girl's birth certificate. On the certificate, it stated, "Father unknown." The millionaire made a decision. He asked the nurse to collect a DNA sample from the child. He himself would provide the material for comparison. In 24 hours, he would know the truth. "I'll need to go out for a bit," he said to the girl, "but I promise I'll be back. Before dinner, is there anything you'd like to eat?" Hope thought for a moment, as if the question were extremely complex. "Chocolate," she finally replied. "I've never eaten a whole chocolate bar just for myself." The millionaire felt his heart clench again. How many simple things had that child never had? How many small pleasures had been denied her while he accumulated fortunes and isolated himself in his glass tower? "I'll bring chocolate," he promised, "and other surprises too." As he left, he looked back one last time. The girl had returned to looking out the window, the locket clutched between her small fingers as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. And perhaps it was, the only link to a past that now threatened to completely rewrite the future of both of them. The millionaire's office occupied the entire floor of an imposing building in the financial district. Through the panoramic windows, the city stretched out like a chessboard, where every move was carefully calculated. For years, he had been the most skilled player in that game. "The shareholders are restless," informed the company lawyer, a middle-aged man with deep dark circles under his eyes and an impeccable suit. "Your absence at the meeting with the Japanese investors has generated speculation. I resolved a personal emergency," replied the millionaire, without offering further explanation as he reviewed the documents the investigator had handed him moments before. Personal emergency? The lawyer raised an eyebrow, unable to hide his surprise. In 15 years of working together, he had never heard such a justification. "Anything we can help with?" The millionaire reflected for a moment. He trusted the lawyer for business matters, but this was different. This was intimate, disturbing, potentially explosive to his carefully constructed image of a controlled and rational man. "Perhaps," he finally replied. "What do you know about Daisy Oliveira?" The lawyer frowned, confused. "The name isn't familiar. She worked here almost 20 years ago. Finance department." There was a moment of silence as the lawyer searched. His memory. "Oh, that redhead? She was part of the group that was let go during the restructuring of '06. Exactly. What about her?" The millionaire slid one of the photos that the investigator had found. Daisy, visibly pregnant, entering a Planned Parenthood clinic. The lawyer's eyes widened, immediately understanding the implication. "Are you suggesting that I'm checking possibilities. The lawyer adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. Sir, with all due respect, if this is true, if that child is yours, the repercussions for the company could be significant. The conservative investors, the public image, the competitors who would seek to exploit any sign of personal instability. I'm aware, interrupted the millionaire, his voice cutting like ice, but there's something more important at stake here. The words hung in the air, strange even to the one who uttered them. When, in his life dedicated to business, had anything been more important than the company? I need to find the people who tried to kill the girl, he continued, and understand why Daisy never reached out to me. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, thoughtfully. As for the first point, we can hire additional private investigators. As for the second, he hesitated as if carefully choosing his words, be direct. Well, sir, maybe she tried. Back then you were already a very busy man with access controlled by assistants and security, and after what happened to your brother, you raised the barriers even higher. The millionaire felt a chill at the mention of his brother, another wound from the past that had never completely healed. What happened to your brother? A child's voice broke the tension of the moment. Both men turned, surprised. In the doorway of the office, holding firmly to the hand of the millionaire's assistant, was Hope. Her curious eyes absorbed every detail of the imposing room, from the crystal chandelier to the contemporary artwork on the walls. Sir, I'm sorry, the assistant hastened to say, visibly embarrassed. The hospital called saying the girl was extremely agitated since you left, since you had said to resolve any issue related to her. The millionaire made a brief gesture, dismissing the apologies. It's okay, Renata. He then turned to Hope, who was now walking timidly around the room, observing everything with fascination. She seemed absurdly small and fragile in that austere environment, designed to inspire power and intimidation. This place is like a real castle, commented the girl, gently touching the polished surface of the conference table. Just like my Mama described. The lawyer cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the unexpected presence. Should I come back later? No, replied the millionaire. We'll discuss the rest tomorrow. When they were alone, Hope approached the window, pressing her nose against the glass to observe the city below. The people look like ants from up here, she commented. Yes, he agreed, feeling strangely vulnerable in the face of the childlike simplicity. Sometimes we forget that each one of them has a story. Like mine? Yes, like yours. He hesitated. Hope, you shouldn't have left the hospital. The girl lowered her eyes, suddenly ashamed. I was afraid you wouldn't come back. The sincere confession completely disarmed him. How many people in his adult life would have the courage to express such a genuine feeling? I promised I'd be back, didn't I? He knelt down to be at her level. And I always keep my promises. That's what the lady in the white coat said, replied Hope, that you never break promises. That's why I let her bring me. The millionaire made a mental note to thank the nurse for her trust, and for knowing him better than many of his long-time associates. I haven't had lunch yet, he said, checking his watch. Are you hungry? The girl nodded shyly. He had never had lunch with a child before. His usual restaurants were sophisticated spaces, where silence was broken only by business conversations in hushed tones. I know a place that serves the best burgers in town, he suggested, surprised by his own proposal. It had been decades since he had eaten a burger. Hope's eyes lit up. Burger? For real? Yes, for real, with fries and a milkshake if you want. As they left the office, the millionaire noticed the curious glances of his employees. The man who avoided any unnecessary interaction, who kept his distance even from nephews at rare family gatherings, was now walking hand in hand with a fragile-looking child, whose attentive eyes observed everything as if she were in a magical world. In the private elevator, Hope asked suddenly, "Do you have kids?" The question caught him off guard. "No," he replied, "I never got married." "Why?" The simplicity of the childish question disconcerted him. How to explain to a child the emotional barriers he himself had built over years? How to talk about choices that prioritize professional success above relationships? About the fear of vulnerability that had haunted him since his youth. "I never found the right person," he finally replied, opting for the simplest explanation, although he knew it wasn't completely true. During lunch, at a secluded table in a vintage diner, he watched fascinated by the girl's joy as she bit into the first burger of her life. The simplicity of that pleasure, something he had long forgotten, was contagious. When they were finishing up, his cell phone rang. It was the lab with the preliminary results of the DNA test. The result seemed to burn on the screen. Probability of paternity 99.98%. He was a father. Father to a girl who had almost been buried alive, daughter of a woman he barely remembered, who had been discarded from his company and apparently discarded from his memory too. How would he tell Hope? How would he deal with the overwhelming guilt that now weighed on his shoulders? And what would he do about the people who had tried to kill his daughter after her mother's death? He looked at the girl, who was trying to reach the last drops of the milkshake with the straw. He realized that, for the first time in many years, he felt something beyond ambition or boredom. He felt responsibility, protection, and perhaps, still too timid to be recognized, the beginning of what could be called love. The sun was setting when the millionaire and Hope returned to the hospital. Nurses and doctors cast curious glances at the man who, just 2 days ago, had been found covered in mud, holding a near-dead child in his arms, and who now returned holding the same girl's hand, both carrying bags from children's stores. "Did you buy the whole store?" joked the attending physician, upon entering the room and finding the bed covered in colorful clothes, children's books, a large teddy bear, and a small jewelry box with a star-shaped pendant. "Just the essentials," replied the millionaire, unable to completely hide a discreet smile as he watched Hope admire a unicorn nightgown, running her fingers over the soft fabric as if she couldn't believe it was real. The doctor called him to the hallway. "The detective stopped by earlier. They have leads on who buried her." "Who?" The millionaire's face hardened instantly. Apparently, the girl's mother lived in an informal settlement on the outskirts. When she died, the area was taken over by a paramilitary group that controls the drug trade in the area. They're cleaning up the place to build a distribution point. And the girl was a nuisance? The voice came out tense, restrained. Basically, they didn't want the trouble of turning her over to the authorities, where they might ask questions about the mother. They decided to handle it their way. The doctor paused. "There's something else. The caseworker is pushing. We need to define the girl's situation in the next few days. I already have." The millionaire held out an envelope. "The results arrived an hour ago." The doctor read the document, her eyes widening gradually. "This changes everything, but there are still legal procedures to follow. My lawyers are taking care of it. I want temporary custody immediately." He paused. "And I want the investigation into these criminals to be treated with the highest priority." Back in the room, he found Hope sitting on the bed, flipping through one of the books they had bought. "Can you read?" he asked, sitting down next to her. "A little," she replied, frowning in concentration. "Mama taught me some letters, and at the church school I learned more, but it's still hard." "Church school?" "Once a week, when Mama was very sick, I went to the church. The priest let the children stay in a room, and a lady taught us to read and write a little." The millionaire felt a pang of admiration for Daisy. Even sick, even in poverty, she had strived to ensure some education for her daughter. Hope, he began, carefully choosing his words. Remember earlier you asked me about my brother? The girl raised her eyes from the book, curious. Yes, the lady from the office said I shouldn't ask about that it makes you sad. Sometimes talking about sad things is necessary. He took a deep breath. My brother's name was Richard. We were very close as children, but we drifted apart as adults. He had problems with substances that are bad for you. He spent all the money he had, and I refused to give him any more, thinking I was helping him improve. He passed away 15 years ago, alone. He died. The childlike simplicity went straight to the point that adults tried to circumvent with euphemisms. Yes, and I felt guilty for a long time. That's when I decided to build walls around me. Invisible. Walls, but very strong. I didn't want to care about anyone because caring hurts. Like when Mama died, agreed Hope, with a wisdom beyond her years. It hurts here. She pointed to her own chest. Exactly. He paused. But today I discovered something that tore down my walls all at once. What? The millionaire pulled a folded paper from his pocket. This is a bit complicated to explain. There are tests that doctors can do to find out if people have the same blood, if they are family. The girl's eyes widened. Like the princes in the books, who discover they are princes because they have royal blood. He smiled at the analogy. Something like that. Hope, I did one of those tests between us. And the result shows that, well, that I'm your father. The girl was motionless for a few seconds, processing the information. Father, like in the movies. Yes, like in the movies. He hesitated. I didn't know about you. If I had known, I would have looked for your mother. I would have helped you. Hope absorbed the information in silence, her small face serious in contemplation. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out and touched the millionaire's face. Exactly as she had done in that first moment after being rescued. Mama always said my father was a good man, but that he didn't know about me. Her eyes shone with contained tears. She never got mad. She said that one day he would find me and that he would recognize me because we have the same eyes. The millionaire felt his throat tighten. It was true. The girl's eyes, although brown like her mother's, had the same almond shape as his own eyes. How hadn't he noticed that before? She was right, he said, his voice choked with emotion. I found you, and now, if you want, I can be your real father. I can take care of you, give you a home, education, everything your mother dreamed for you. And I won't need to go to the place for children without a family. Never! You have a family now, small, just the two of us, but a family. What happened next caught the millionaire completely off guard. Hope dropped the book, knelt on the bed, and threw her arms around his neck, hugging him with all the strength her small body allowed. Daddy, she whispered against his shoulder, experimenting with the new word. And at that moment, the last brick of the wall that the millionaire had built around his heart crumbled completely. This is absurd, declared the company lawyer, pacing nervously through the millionaire's office. You barely know this child. The DNA test could be wrong. We need a retest, more time to assess the legal and financial implications. The test isn't wrong. Even so, a decision of this magnitude can't be made in 48 hours. What if this is some kind of scam? What if the mother planned all this before? Enough! The millionaire's voice cut through the air like a blade. Daisy is dead. She died of tuberculosis alone in a shack while I was accumulating millions. The girl was almost buried alive. What kind of scam would that be? The lawyer adjusted his tie, visibly uncomfortable. I understand your emotion at this moment, but I have a professional duty to protect your interests. And it seems you're making impulsive decisions that could compromise everything you've built. My interests, the millionaire gave a dry laugh. It's funny how I spent decades believing that my interests were limited to numbers on spreadsheets. and stocks on the exchange. But in the last 3 days, I've realized there's something much more important. And what would that be? Doing the right thing for the first time in my life." The lawyer sighed, defeated. "Very well. If you're determined to assume paternity, at least allow us to do it the right way, without fanfare, with confidentiality, agreements for hospital staff, to ensure the press doesn't turn this into a circus." The millionaire agreed. Despite his emotional determination, he was still a practical man. Public acknowledgements and press conferences wouldn't solve anything. The important thing was to ensure Hope's safety and well-being. "There's one more thing," continued the lawyer, hesitant, "about the men who tried to get rid of the girl. Has the police identified them?" "Yes and no. They know who they are, but they can't just raid the place and arrest them. It would be a high-risk operation in territory dominated by them." The millionaire felt his blood boil. So they're just going to let them get away with it, after what they did? Not exactly. The police are setting up a larger operation to dismantle the entire network. But that takes time, strategy. "Time we don't have," countered the millionaire. "What if they find out Hope is alive? That she can identify them?" A heavy silence settled between the two men. The millionaire's concern was valid. Criminals who didn't hesitate to bury a child alive wouldn't hesitate to try again, especially if they saw her as a threat. "We need protection," concluded the millionaire. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. "I've already arranged that," assured the lawyer. "But it would be prudent to consider a period out of the country, maybe a trip to Europe, while the situation is resolved here." The suggestion made sense, but the millionaire felt uncomfortable. Running wasn't his style. Besides, Hope had just lost her mother, been rescued from a traumatic situation, and discovered a father she never knew she had. Would it be fair to uproot her from everything she knew, even if it wasn't much? "I'll think about it," he finally replied. Before the lawyer could insist, the office door opened. The assistant entered pale, holding an envelope. "Sir, this has just been delivered." The messenger insisted it was urgent. The millionaire opened the envelope. Inside, he found a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "We know the girl is alive. We know who you are. $1 million by tomorrow, or we finish the job. Instructions will follow." Below the message, a photograph, Hope sleeping in the hospital room, clearly taken from the outside window. The photo was recent, probably from the night before. The blood froze in his veins. "Call the hospital now," he ordered the assistant. "Tell them I'm on my way, and call in additional security immediately." On the way to the hospital, driving his own car for the first time in years, the millionaire struggled to maintain control. Anger, fear, and guilt mixed in an emotional storm that threatened to consume him. Guilt, because if he hadn't laid off Daisy, if he had cared enough to remember the night they spent together, if he had been a different man, none of this would be happening. Hope would have grown up safely, comfortably, with opportunities. When he arrived at the hospital, he found a scene of apparent normality. The reinforced security he had requested the day before was positioned discreetly. Nothing seemed out of place, except for one detail. The door to Hope's room was ajar. With his heart pounding against his chest, he entered the room, prepared for the worst, and found the bed empty, the sheets disarranged, the teddy bear fallen on the floor. "Hope?" he called, his voice betraying his despair. "Sir!" A nurse appeared behind him. "The girl is in the playroom with the therapist. Do you want me to call her?" The relief was so immense that his legs almost buckled, but the threat remained real. The playroom was at the end of the hall, with large windows that overlooked the hospital garden. Windows that, he realized with horror, offered a clear view of whoever was inside. "I need to see her now," he said, already running down the hall. The pediatric playroom was a universe apart within the sterile environment of the hospital. Colorful walls, toys, books, and comfortable beanbags created a welcoming atmosphere. In the center, sitting on a soft rug, Hope was playing with building blocks, focused on building what appeared to be a replica of the building where the millionaire's office was located. "Daddy!" she exclaimed upon seeing him, her face lighting up instantly. The words still sounded strange, new, loaded with a responsibility he had never planned to assume, and yet now it was the most important word in the world. "Hello, little one." He forced a smile, hiding his worry. "What are you building?" "Your glass castle," she replied, pointing to the hospital window from where one could see in the distance the mirrored building that housed the headquarters of his companies. "For when I go to live there." The occupational therapist smiled, standing up. "She has a lot of artistic talent and an impressive visual memory. Can we talk for a moment?" asked the millionaire, indicating a corner of the room. The specialist followed him, intrigued by his tense expression. "I need to get Hope out of here today. It's not safe." The woman frowned. "I understand your concern, sir, but the girl is still under observation, and there are legal procedures underway." "The procedures are resolved," he interrupted, pulling a set of documents from his pocket. "I have temporary custody and medical authorization for transfer. As for the observation, I will hire a private healthcare team." The therapist examined the documents, surprised by the efficiency and speed with which they had been obtained. Power and influence, after all, opened doors, or in this case, closed them for protection. "Everything seems to be in order," she finally agreed. "But as a professional, I must warn you that more abrupt changes can be traumatic for Hope. She just lost her mother, went through a terrible experience, and is now adapting to you, to this environment. Believe me, I know that, but there are concrete threats to her safety." He lowered his voice. "The people who tried to kill her know where she is." The therapist's eyes widened. "In that case, there's no discussion. I'll help in any way I can to ensure her safety." They returned to Hope, who was now adding small details to her block construction. "Hope," began the millionaire, kneeling beside her. "Remember when I said you were coming to live with me?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "That's going to happen sooner than we thought. Today, in fact." "Today?" Her eyes lit up. "Am I going to the glass castle?" "Not exactly." He hesitated. How to explain to a child that they were fleeing dangerous criminals? "We're going to another place, a special place, where we can get to know each other better, like a adventure." The word adventure immediately captured the little one's imagination. "What kind of adventure?" "A trip. To a house in the countryside with plenty of space. To play. But we have to go now, and we can't tell anyone. It will be our secret for now." Hope considered the proposal for a moment. "Can I take the teddy bear you gave me?" "Of course. And all the other presents too." "Duh." While the therapist helped Hope pack up the blocks, the millionaire called the head of security. "We're leaving in 30 minutes. I want 3 cars, different routes. No one besides you should know the final destination." "Yes, sir. What about the ranch upstate? I've already activated the protocol we discussed." "Perfect. Are the trusted men in position?" "Yes, ex-military, all with impeccable background checks. The property is secure." The ranch was a secluded property that the millionaire had acquired years before as an investment but rarely visited. Located hundreds of miles from the capital, surrounded by a vast expanse of land, and protected by a state-of-the-art security system, it would be the perfect hiding place until the threat was neutralized. As he was about to hang up, the head of security added, "Sir, there's an additional matter. The corporate lawyer is quite agitated. He insists on speaking with you urgently." The millionaire frowned. "What's it about?" He wouldn't reveal it, but he mentioned something about a workaround for the problem. A chill ran down his spine. There was something in the tone, in the choice of words, that made him instantly alert. The lawyer had always been ruthless. In business, adopting tactics that bordered on illegality to protect the company's interests. Could it be that... "Tell him I'm in a meeting and will return his call when I can," he instructed, deciding to deal with that suspicion after Hope was safe. When he hung up, he found the girl watching him curiously. "Is everything okay?" she asked, with a perception that would surprise any adult. "It will be," he promised, extending his hand. "Let's go?" As they walked down the hall, the millionaire realized that for the first time in decades, he wasn't thinking about stocks, contracts, or profits. He was thinking about his daughter, her future, the life they would have together, if they could survive the next few hours. In the hospital parking lot, 3 identical cars with tinted windows awaited. The plan was simple. Hope and he would get into one vehicle, while mannequins of similar size would occupy the other 2. The 3 cars would leave simultaneously, in different directions, confusing anyone who was watching. "It's like in spy movies," whispered Hope, enchanted by the strategy. "Exactly like in the movies," agreed the millionaire, admiring his daughter's resilience. After everything she had been through, she could still find excitement and adventure in the present moment. "Ready to depart," announced the driver, a man of discreet appearance but clearly military posture. The millionaire squeezed Hope's small hand and took a deep breath. It was time to fight for what really mattered. The road that wound through the countryside seemed endless. After a 3-hour drive, Hope had fallen asleep in the back seat, cuddling the teddy bear, her head resting on the millionaire's lap. He watched her face relax in sleep, the soft freckles on her small nose, the reddish curls falling on her forehead, unmistakable traits of Daisy. The cell phone vibrated discreetly. It was a message from the head of security. "Cars 2 and 3. Being followed. Evasion in progress. You are clean." The strategy seemed to be working. The security teams in the other vehicles had identified pursuers and were now leading them in false directions, while the car carrying the millionaire and Hope continued without incident to the ranch. Another message arrived, this time from the private investigator. "Crucial information. Call when you can." The millionaire hesitated. He didn't want to wake Hope, but something in the message indicated urgency. Gently, he adjusted the girl's position, laying her completely on the seat and covering her with a light blanket. He moved to the front seat next to the driver and made the call. "I found out who's behind the threats," said the investigator. Without preamble. "You won't believe it." "Who?" "Your corporate lawyer. He's involved with the group that controls the area where Daisy lived. Apparently their company is interested in the land for a major development, and your lawyer is facilitating the acquisition under the table." The millionaire felt his blood run cold. The man who for 15 years had taken care of his business, who knew every detail of his companies, who had access to virtually all his personal information. "How did you find out about this?" "Following the money. There are suspicious transfers from an offshore account linked to him to accounts associated with the leader of that criminal group. And I intercepted communications between them in the last 24 hours. He revealed where you were taking the girl." "What?" The millionaire's voice rose involuntarily. "Yes. They know about the ranch. They must already be on their way." Panic took over him for a moment. Then the analytical coldness that had made him a successful businessman returned. "Change direction," he instructed the driver immediately. "We're not going to the ranch anymore." "Where to, sir?" The millionaire thought quickly. He needed a safe, unpredictable place where the corrupt lawyer couldn't find them. "My dad's fishing cabin," he decided. "On the mountain lake. No one knows about it except my family, and it doesn't even appear on my financial records because it was never formally transferred to my name." The driver nodded, changing the route without asking questions. That's what he was paid for, quick adaptation and absolute discretion. "What about the lawyer?" asked the investigator, still on the line. "Keep monitoring him. I want move every communication and alert the FBI. This goes far beyond an attempted murder now. There's corporate corruption, money laundering, association with criminal organizations. I'm already preparing a complete dossier, but keep in mind that he's extremely well connected. He has friends in high places." "So do I," replied the millionaire, a cold determination in his voice, "and now I have a much stronger reason to use those connections." As he hung up, he noticed that Hope had woken up and was watching him with sleepy eyes from the back seat. "Did we change course?" she asked, noticing the change in direction. "Yes," he confirmed, returning to the back seat. "We're going to an even more special place, a cabin by a lake, where I used to fish with my dad when I was about your age." The girl's eyes lit up. "Are there real fish that we can catch?" "Lots of them, and we can try to fish together if you want." "I've never fished," she confessed, "but I saw it on TV once, at a neighbor's house." The millionaire smiled, imagining what it would be like to teach Hope to fish, to swim, to ride a bike. All the things that a father would normally teach a daughter, and that he had missed in the first 6 years of her life. The trip to the cabin would take a few more hours. The road became increasingly narrow and winding, climbing through the mountains. Eventually, they would have to abandon the car and follow the last stretch on foot, along a trail known only to those who frequented that remote region. When night fell, they were already deeply embedded in the forest that surrounded the lake. The driver parked the vehicle in a small clearing, hidden by dense vegetation. "From here we go on foot," explained the millionaire. "It's only a mile to the cabin." Hope looked apprehensively at the darkness around them. "Are there dangerous animals?" "No, little one, and I'll be with you all the time." He knelt down, looking her in the eyes. "I trust your driver with important tasks, like if he notices someone followed us, he's going to divert their attention while we get safely to the cabin." "Like a guardian?" she asked, her eyes shining with the reference to the storybooks they had bought. "Exactly like a guardian," he agreed, placing her on his shoulders. "Now let's go. I have a flashlight, and the path is marked by white stones that glow in the dark." The trail through the forest, which would seem scary to any ordinary child, turned into a magical adventure in Hope's eyes. The quartz stones that marked the path really shone under the moonlight, creating a silver path between the trees. The millionaire told stories that his own father had told him during those walks, decades ago. Legends about spirits of the forest, trees that whispered secrets, and enchanted fish that granted wishes. When they finally spotted the cabin, a rustic dark wood construction on the edge of the lake, the millionaire felt an unexpected emotion. How long had it been since he had visited that place? 15, 20 years? Since his father's death, probably. So much time wasted pursuing fortunes, when his most precious legacy had been there, abandoned in the mountains. "We've arrived at our secret castle," he announced, lowering Hope from his shoulders. The girl ran to the cabin's porch, marveling. "It's like in the stories Mama told. A wooden house in the forest, where no one can find us." The millionaire felt a pang in his chest. Even in that moment of flight, even with his life in danger, he couldn't help but think of Daisy, and how she had kept his memory alive for her daughter, even without ever receiving anything from him in return. Inside the cabin, everything remained exactly as in his memories. The rustic furniture covered by protective sheets, the stone fireplace, the fishing rods hanging on the wall, the old books on the shelves. Time seemed to have frozen in there. "Let's light the wood stove and prepare something to eat," he suggested, realizing that they hadn't had dinner during the hasty escape. While he lit the fire and heated water for an improvised hot chocolate with the supplies they had brought, he watched Hope explore every corner of the cabin with fascination. She seemed especially intrigued by the framed photographs on the fireplace mantel, yellowed images of an older man teaching a boy to fish. "Is that you?" she asked, pointing to the boy of perhaps 10 years, proudly holding a fish almost his size. "Yes," he confirmed, approaching, "and that's my father, your grandfather. He loved this place. He said that here he could hear his own thoughts, away from the noise of the world." "Where is he now?" "In heaven," answered the millionaire simply. "Like your mother." The girl nodded, understanding the connection. "Do you think they know each other there?" The question, asked with the innocence and purity that only a child possesses, touched something deep within the man. "Maybe," he replied, surprising himself with the comfort the idea brought him. "Maybe my father is teaching your mother to fish right now." Hope smiled, satisfied with the image. "And taking care of her too?" "Definitely." After a simple meal, the millionaire improvised a comfortable bed for Hope in one of the rooms. As he tucked her under the covers, she held his hand. "The bad men won't find us here, right?" The worry in her voice was a painful reminder of everything she had already faced in her short life. Children should fear imaginary monsters, not real men who tried to bury her alive. "No," he assured her, stroking her hair. "This is our secret place, and tomorrow, when the sun rises, you'll see how beautiful it is here. The lake shines as if it has diamonds floating in the water." When Hope finally fell asleep, the millionaire returned to the main room and called the investigator using a satellite phone, the only means of communication that worked in that remote location. "Any news?" he asked, keeping his voice low. "Several," replied the investigator. "Your lawyer is desperate. He sent men to the ranch, but obviously they didn't find anyone. The FBI has started the investigation based on the evidence I provided, but they're acting discreetly so as not to alert him." "And the press?" "For now, nothing. But it's only a matter of time before someone connects the dots. The rescued girl, your sudden disappearance, the DNA test. I suggest you be prepared for the moment when the story comes out." The millionaire sighed. Throughout his life, he had cultivated a private existence, away from the spotlight despite his fortune. Now, however, he knew that eventually he would have to face public opinion. "There's one more thing," continued the investigator. "I found a diary of Daisy's. It was among the belongings that were removed from the shack after her death, before the place was demolished. A social worker kept it, thinking it might have sentimental value for the girl when she grew up." "What does the diary say?" "I haven't had access to the complete content yet, but apparently she documented several attempts to contact you over the years. Letters that were returned, calls that never got past secretaries and receptionists, even a visit to the company headquarters, when she was barred at the entrance. Each word was like a stab wound." The millionaire closed his eyes, imagining Daisy, young, pregnant, desperate, trying to reach him through the barriers that he himself had erected. "I want that diary," he declared finally. "Hope deserves to know her mother's story, and I need to understand what happened. I'll arrange that. And one more thing, the complete medical examination of the girl. In addition to malnutrition and bruises, there are indications that she may have a congenital heart defect. Nothing serious at the moment, but it will require monitoring." This new information hit him like a physical blow. His daughter had not only survived poverty, the loss of her mother, and an attempted murder, but also carried a medical condition that, if not treated properly, could threaten her life. "I understand. As soon as it's safe, I'll arrange for the best specialists." After hanging up, the millionaire sat down in the old rocking chair in front of the fireplace, watching the flames dance. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to cry openly. For Daisy, who had died alone. For Hope, who had suffered so much in her short life. For his father, whose advice he had ignored. For his brother, whom he had failed to save. And also, perhaps mainly for himself, and the years wasted pursuing the wrong kind of wealth. He didn't know how long he remained there, lost in thought. At some point, he felt a presence beside him. Hope, barefoot and sleepy, had come out of the room and was now watching him with worried eyes. "You're crying," she stated, touching his wet face. "Yes," he admitted without trying to hide the tears. "Sometimes adults cry too." "Mama said that crying washes the soul," said the girl, repeating the simple wisdom she had learned. "Can I stay here with you?" Without waiting for an answer, she simply climbed onto his lap and settled against his chest, as if that were the most natural place in the world to be. The millionaire wrapped his arms around her, feeling the warmth of that small body, the fragility and at the same time the incredible strength she possessed. "Everything's going to be okay," whispered Hope, using the same words that he had said to her so many times in recent days. "We have each other now." And at that moment, for the first time since all that madness had begun, the millionaire really believed that it would. The dawn on the lake was exactly as the millionaire had described. The surface of the water reflected the light of the rising sun in thousands of bright spots, like diamonds floating on the deep blue. Hope watched the spectacle of nature from the cabin window, her eyes wide with admiration. "I've never seen anything so beautiful," she whispered, as if she feared breaking the magic of the moment with her voice. "I had forgotten how beautiful it is too," admitted the millionaire, placing a cup of hot chocolate in his daughter's small hands. "Sometimes we forget to look at the most important things." The days in the cabin established a surprisingly comfortable routine. In the morning, they explored the shore of the lake, collecting interesting stones and watching the birds. In the afternoon, the millionaire taught Hope to fish, reviving the lessons that his own father had given him decades before. In the evening, they read together the old books from the shelf, or simply talked in front of the fireplace. It was during one of those nightly conversations that Hope asked the question he knew would eventually come. "Why didn't you look for—" "Mama, why didn't you know about me?" The millionaire took a deep breath. He had rehearsed the answer countless times in his mind, seeking a balance between the truth that Hope deserved and what a 6-year-old could understand. "Your mother and—" "Met very briefly," he began. "It was at a time when I was very focused on building my company, on making money. I didn't pay attention to the people around me. I didn't really care about anyone." He paused, carefully choosing his next words. "When your mother left the company, I didn't even notice, and it seems that later she tried to find me to tell me about you, but I had built so many barriers around me that her messages never reached me." "What kind of barriers?" "Secretaries who filtered calls, security guards who blocked unscheduled visitors, assistants who decided which letters I read. I thought this protected me, that it allowed me to focus on what was important, but I was wrong about what really mattered." Hope absorbed the explanation in silence, her expression serious as she processed the information. "Mama never spoke badly about you," she said finally. "Even when we were hungry or when she was very sick. She said that one day you would find us, that everything would be okay." The words hit the millionaire like a physical blow. Daisy's unwavering faith, even in the face of so much suffering, was a silent accusation to his own indifference. "Your mother was an extraordinary woman," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion, "much stronger and wiser than I ever was. And she was right about one thing. I found you. Too late for her, but in time to fulfill the promise she made to you." At that moment, the satellite phone rang, breaking the moment of intimacy. It was the investigator with important news. "The FBI arrested your corporate lawyer this morning," he informed without preamble. They found compromising documents that link him not only to the attempt against Hope, but to several illegal real estate operations. He's cooperating, turning in the others involved in exchange for a reduced sentence. "So it's over?" asked the millionaire, hardly daring to believe it. "Are we safe?" "Apparently so. The men who carried out the crime are being hunted down. But the mastermind is already in custody. You can come back whenever you want." As he hung up, he found Hope watching him intently. "Can we go home?" she asked, noticing the change in his expression. "Yes," he confirmed. "The bad men won't bother us anymore. We can go back and start our real life together for real." But something on the girl's face made him hesitate. "What is it, little one? Aren't you happy to go back?" Hope bit her lip, suddenly shy. "It's just that I like it here. The lake, the trees, the sky full of stars. In the city you can't see the stars right." The millionaire smiled, understanding. In a few days, the rustic cabin had become more of a home for them than the luxurious penthouse ever was. Here, away from the pressures and artifices of the corporate world, he rediscovered not only the pleasure of simple things, but also a part of himself that he thought he had lost. "What if we could have both?" he suggested. "Keep the cabin to come whenever we want to see the stars, but also have a house in the city, near good schools for you, doctors, parks." Hope's face lit up. "Can we do that? Have 2 houses?" "We can. Do whatever we want," he assured her. "In fact, I have an even better idea." In the following week, when they finally returned to the city, the millionaire put into practice the plan he had conceived during those days of reflection in the cabin. First, he established a foundation in Daisy's name, dedicated to supporting single mothers and children in vulnerable situations. Then he began the process of formally adopting Hope, even after having confirmed biological paternity. Finally, he made the decision that most surprised his associates. He stepped away from the daily management of his companies, delegating responsibilities, to dedicate himself to his daughter and the social projects that now seemed infinitely more important than financial statements. The story of the millionaire who saved a girl from death and discovered he was her biological father eventually reached the press, moving the country. But contrary to what his advisors feared, the repercussion was largely positive. The image of the cold and calculating man gave way to that of the dedicated father who put his daughter above everything. 6 months after the fateful day when he found Hope buried in that vacant lot, the millionaire inaugurated a housing and educational complex built exactly on the site where there had once been shacks. The name of the project? Daisy's Hope. On the day of the inauguration, as he cut the symbolic ribbon with a large golden scissors, he felt Hope's small hand squeeze his. He looked down and found her shining eyes fixed on him, overflowing with pride and love. "Mama is watching us. From heaven," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed, surprising himself with his own certainty, "and I'm sure she's smiling." That night, as he put Hope to sleep in her new room, a cozy space decorated with nature themes, including a mural of the lake where the cabin was located, she held his hand once more. "Thank you for finding me," she said simply. The millionaire smiled, feeling a peace that he had never imagined possible. "I thank you for finding me, little one. You saved me as much as I saved you." When he closed the door to the room, he paused for a moment in the hallway, observing the photographs that now decorated the walls of his home, images of Daisy that he had managed to recover, old photos of him with his father at the cabin, and more recently, dozens of records of moments with Hope, a mosaic of lost and found memories, of wasted chances and new opportunities. The fortune he had accumulated over decades now seemed to him only a means to provide comfort and security to his daughter, and to help other children who, like her, needed only a chance. In his office, on the table where before there were only Financial reports, now rested Daisy's diary, finally recovered. He had not yet dared to read it in its entirety, but he had promised himself that he would, and that one day, when Hope was older, he would share with her the words of her mother. For now, it was enough to live each day as a gift, an opportunity, to be the man that Daisy had always believed he could be, the man that his father had tried to educate him to be, the man that Hope deserved as a father, no more the cold and distant millionaire, but simply the man of hope. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day.